Well, it seems like Joel Embiid and Paul George are here to stay for at least one more season. Multiple reports coming in that the Sixers are not expected to trade either of these two stars this offseason. So, with that being said, where could they go from here? We'll explore that in today's show. I am Jake Chipper. Thank you for tuning in to today's 76ers. Now, let's just get right to the report from Jake Fischer himself, who had this to say regarding the 76ers and had some other notes on the Sixers we'll get into. Don't expect that duo of Embiid and Paul George, furthermore, to be broken up. Sources say that recent reports suggesting the Sixers will be looking to explore George's trade market in conjunction with the draft are misread. It has been whispered often in league circles going back to Philadelphia's free agency courtship of George last summer that the Sixers would not turn around and try to move their marquee acquisition in the early stages of his Philly tenure unless George himself asked for a deal. And it just makes sense at this point with where we're at, given how much money both of these guys are making, given what their values are right now with their injury concerns, and especially for Paul George, just how poor he played in general last year. There really probably wasn't a lot that they were going to get in potential trades. We'll dive more into this in just a second. But first, I want to hear from y'all. Is this the right call, in your opinion, to keep both Paul George and Joel Embiid, assuming they even had an option to move either of them at some point in the offseason? Give me an A if you agree with keeping both Embiid and PG, or give me a D if you disagree and you think they should still be trying to send one or both of them out of Philadelphia this offseason. But look, again, in my opinion, they don't really have much of a choice. When you canvass the league, one, with the amount of money they're making, like who's matching some of these massive, massive deals that Embiid and Paul George are on next season? When you look at their salaries for next year, Embiid over $55 million, Paul George over 51, and it's just going to keep going up as both of them get older. I don't really see a reason why a team would be super interested in bringing on those numbers with their injury concerns, with their decline in play, and as both of these players get older. The only scenario we've talked about on the show in which you could possibly move off these guys and still get something decent in return, because you're not going to get anything close to, especially for Embiid, what his play could be if he were to get healthy. Only scenario is really attaching that number 3 overall pick, which I've said multiple times. I'm not trading the pick. I want to get a player who, in my opinion, Ace Bailey is that guy that can help the long-term future of this team with a Tyrese Maxey, hopefully Quentin Grimes, Jared McCain, and build for the future instead of trading it with Embiid or Paul George for who knows what you'd get even at this point. And look, Jake Fischer also reporting, as we heard multiple times, that the Sixers are not interested in moving that 3rd overall pick. Sources say Philadelphia greatly values the opportunity to add a young player to its core, which already features 24-year-old Tyrese Maxey, soon-to-be second-year guard Jared McCain, to complement the veteran duo of Joel Embiid and Paul George. So, assuming they're both going to be back at this point, the question becomes, where do the Sixers go from here? With these big contracts on their roster, how can the Sixers be better than they were last year and ensure that they don't have another disaster like last season was? Well, first, I think you got to talk about the health of these guys. And is there any chance, specifically for Paul George, that we can see a bounce-back year after they acquired him last offseason? Well, Paul George was on his podcast, which he has recently started up again, and talked about some of the struggles last year and the injuries he was dealing with. The most frustrating thing about the last season was obviously I came in, I was healthy, didn't have any hiccups, spent the whole offseason working on my body, getting healthy, and then I get to Philly, preseason, I get hurt. He hyperextended that knee. From that point on, I didn't give it time to fully heal. I got an expectation that I'm not going to leave the fans hanging. I want to go out there and play. I'm out there and it's like, damn, I know something ain't right. I ain't got my burst. I can't move. And I couldn't quite pin what it was. Obviously, the hyperextension, my knee was still bothering me. Had the brace for a while. Then started to develop a quad tendon injury from wearing that brace. Then that started to go flat on me. I'm like, man, so I'm all right. Let me start taking medicine, try to numb this up, start doing that. Then I had an injury that I didn't even know what it was and what the origin of why I was feeling like something's off. I can't move. I'm used to be able to explode. I'm used to cutting. Come to find out, I had a torn adductor. Now, of course, this is the groin injury that Paul George was dealing with for much of the second half of the season. Now we know it was a torn adductor, which, look, does usually have a multi-month recovery time, and he was trying to play through it for quite a while. And I know people don't want to hear the excuses. We're sick of it, of hearing, oh, he was injured. This is why the play was so poor. I understand that Sixers fans, that's not what they want to hear. They just want to see him go out and play. But look, he was dealing with injuries from before game 1 till he was ruled out at the end of the season. So, look, is there a chance that maybe he does still have some of that explosiveness that he talked about in there? Honestly, I'm kind of skeptical because of him getting older, and we've seen that decline over the course of his career. And look, who's to say the injuries won't just keep piling up? You can say, yeah, I was so injured last year. I'm going to get my body right, get myself right heading into next season. But again, as he continues to get older, Paul George has a long injury history. And same thing for Embiid. Like, who's to say that these injuries won't just keep coming? And this is unfortunately the reality of the Sixers that Jake Fischer also outlined in his recent reporting. Something else the Sixers understand very clearly: their hopes of competing for a championship after this season's 24-58 misery almost certainly hinges on Embiid's health and effectiveness rather than trying to concoct some sort of Paul George trade. It's just the unfortunate reality with this team. We could talk about all these different moves they can make, all these different players they can trade, who they can sign, how they can get this team younger and more athletic to be healthy over a full season and push for a playoff run. At the end of the day, none of it really matters unless Joel Embiid is healthy, and you can't really do anything to control that or to predict that. It kind of just is what it is. So the Sixers really are just relying on, again, a 7-foot plus big man who has his injury history is to come back next year and be fully healthy. Even Daryl Morey said, oh, if he's healthy, if he's back next year, he can be great. Sure, but it's a huge, huge if. So what more can the Sixers really do to ensure the roster is ready in case those injuries do happen? We'll get into some of that here in a second. But first, I want you to predict it. Will Paul George have a bounce-back season next year? Will he stay healthy and not maybe reach an all-star level, but at least be good enough and better than he was last year to help this team make a playoff run? Give me a Y for yours. Give me an N for no. Sound off what you think down in the comments section. So as we look ahead to how this team could be constructed heading into next year, you obviously have your big three: Paul George, Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, all making a ton of money, specifically for Embiid and PG. Then under contract as well, you got McCain on the rookie deal. You got Ricky Council on a very low salary as well, a non-guaranteed, but he's 100% staying at that value. You got Adam Bona, who showed some really good flashes in the back half of last season. You got the third overall pick, which will pay somewhere about $10 to $12 million, and then the 35th pick as well, around 1.5 up to around $2 million as well that you got to factor in, assuming they don't trade either of those two picks. So with just those 8 players against 6 guys and 2 draft picks you assume are coming to Philadelphia, you're already accounting for about $153 million. That's right at the salary cap for next year, which is 154. Leaves you with, what, 40-ish, 50-ish million under those aprons. And remember, if you want to bring back Ersan Yabusele, ideally he takes the taxpayer mid-level exception, you get hard capped at the second apron, which means you cannot go over that number no matter what, which complicates things when you talk about Quentin Grimes. Now, you look at some of their notable free agents. Of course, the Grimes that I mentioned is restricted, so the Sixers can match an offer he gets. But if a team like the Nets throws a huge bag at him, 25, 30 million, and you want to bring back Yabusele, like, it's very, very difficult when it comes to the financials. Justin Edwards with a team option will be back. If they, for some reason, decline the option, I mean, the city would be in shambles. He'll be back at about $2 million. Then you got a few player options with Kelly Oubre, Andre Drummond, Eric Gordon, who I don't know what they're going to do. I imagine Gordon declines because the vet min for him is higher than what his salary is next year. Oubre and Drummond, not sure how strong their markets would be. I wouldn't be surprised if they both pick up those player options. So really, with all of this, the Sixers just don't have much room for improvement. There's not many areas you can say they can make this trade here. They can sign this guy here because they're not going to have any money to sign guys, and they're going to have to use the mid-level on Yabusele. So there's not many avenues I really see for them to be able to go out and upgrade the roster, especially through trades. Now, the couple guys I could see maybe having some value on the trade market for other teams, Kelly Oubre and Andre Drummond. About $13 million combined between the two of them. I think contenders, would like Kelly Oubre, what he brings defensively, his athleticism. He always plays hard, but the shooting has just not really been there. It's never been there for him. Not something you expect him to do, but on this team, I would much more love to see a player who's more consistent from outside. Drummond dealt a lot of injuries last year, wasn't very good, but at $5 million, I think a lot of teams would like him as a potential backup center. So if you do package these two, about $13 million, what could you get? And, I was canvassing the league, seeing guys who are making around that $13 million range, and there's just really not a lot of guys that I think would be true upgrades for this roster. Corey Kispert's a great shooter, sure, and would, I think, fit maybe a little more than Kelly Oubre, but he's such a liability on the defensive end of the floor. And when I think about, come playoff time, if you're a liability on either end of the floor, you really get played off the court. Like, they'll just attack you on defense if you're not a good defender, possession after possession after possession. It doesn't really matter how good you are offensively. It's not like Corey Kiss where it's like a Steph Curry where he's just out here lighting things up. Like, he's going to get played off the floor. I would love Herb Jones on this team, but I don't see why the Pelicans would ever want to deal him to the Sixers for Kelly Oubre or Andre Drummond. I would never do that in a million years if I was New Orleans. So I don't really see that being a possibility. They've said they don't want to move off of him for good reason. He's a great young player in this league. Bobby Portis is a player option. We'll see what he does with that. If the Bucks are doing up trading Giannis and they're kind of a little bit of a reset, maybe you could convince him to take Oubre, Drummond, and you attach a pick in there for Bobby Portis. Robert Williams at that money number, about $13 million. He has his injury concerns. I don't need another injury-prone big man on this team. Moses Moody was an intriguing young player, but, man, he was horrendous for those Warriors in the playoffs, at about $11 million. So I don't really think I'd want him on this team. I don't think he's a better player than Kelly Oubre. Another name that my boy Smitty brought up as well is Daniel Gafford, who makes about $13 million. That could be an option I could be interested in at that center spot if the Mavs are trying to clear up some money. You get another backup center in here in Daniel Gafford. Behind Joel Embiid, and you have Embiid, Gafford, and Adembona. I could get behind that for a deal of Drummond and Kelly Oubre, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Sixers really just run it back. Daryl Morey did say he wants to get younger as opposed to bringing in all the older guys and vets that he brought in last year, but I think that's more in the way of moving off of an Eric Gordon, moving off of a Kyle Lowry, moving off of an Andre Drummond, and leaning on the younger guys they already have on the squad. That's why they traded away Caleb Martin for Quentin Grimes. So hopefully they can bring him back as a younger guy. You give someone like Jared McCain a full year, Quentin Grimes a full year. That's why I don't think running it back is the worst thing in the world, because you get to see more from these guys that you didn't get to see a lot from last year. In Grimes, in McCain, you're able to give Adembona another full year of run. Justin Edwards, Ricky Council, can he continue to develop? So I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, but it's pretty much the only option they had because there's not a lot of flexibility for Philadelphia, assuming they are keeping Embiid and Paul George. Before we get on out of here, predict it for me here. Will the Sixers make the playoffs next year? I think it'd be a disaster if they don't. I think you'd see Daryl Morey, Nick Nurse fired, and I think you definitely see one of, if not both of, Joel Embiid and Paul George traded. But let me know. Give me a P for playoffs, M for miss. Be sure to subscribe to the channel as we get closer and closer to the draft and free agency here on 76ers Now.